Jono Alderson, welcome to the WP Minute.
Thank you very much for having me. What a treat.
What a treat indeed. What a week. What a few weeks.
Yeah, it's a nice distraction.
To have this conversation. Yeah, I mean, I've seen you in the space, of course. I've seen you in post that. I've seen you on Twitter, largely about like WordPress and SEO and stuff. You had brought up one of the more critical milestones that have happened in the last 6 or so months, which was .com versus .org. .com doing this whole plugin mirroring thing, which we can probably get into today. That was the genesis of me reaching out to you saying, "Hey, you want to chat about this on the show? You want to talk about it?" There's some other stuff that's happened since, and
it's related, I guess, right? It's the same kind of root topic behind all of that.
Yeah, same root topic behind it, and we'll talk about that as well. First and foremost, you're an independent technical SEO consultant. That's the Twitter bio. The website is jonoalderson.com if you want all things SEO consulting from Jono. But what else do you do in SEO? How do you frame that in today's world of SEO? If somebody's like, yeah, I want to hire this guy, but what does it mean?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? Because, SEO continues to morph and change. I think it's, in some ways, it's far harder to characterize what that is now, but in some ways it's far easier. It's just website quality. This is what it's always been. Google, users want good websites where good is amorphous and big and complex, and Google wants to reward that. So it's everything. It's user experience, it's technical integrity, it's performance, it's security, it's accessibility, it's 100 other areas. And I'm deeply into many of those areas, and the bits I'm not, I know enough to connect the right people and understand what good looks like. So it's working out, where are you today? Turns out you're probably a 6 out of 10. Where does it make sense to aim for? Because 10 out of 10 is usually not feasible. But if you can get to 8 out of 10, are you going to double your traffic? Are you going to please your users? Are you going to increase revenue? So I work with businesses to go, how do we build a roadmap to do that? Largely focusing on the kind of more technical side. Partly because WordPress is awesome and that's the bit I enjoy, but mostly that's the bit where people have the most room to improve. Most people really often haven't kind of gone down and really looked at their website and said, is this inherently good? Making it faster, making it better, tying up all the things. That's the stuff I really enjoy.
I noticed you didn't say backlinks in that.
Oh no!
So help me. As somebody, I've steered clear of SEO largely because
Well done.
Largely because I've just been frustrated by it. And I was out on the way here. I was listening to another podcast about creativity and storytelling and all this stuff. And he brought up, and actually this is a friend of mine. I've known him fairly well. And he talked about the approach of content creators, not marketers, but just folks who are like creating content, kind of look at it like this conveyor belt. Like, I got to do this thing, I got to drop it in, here comes the next one, I got to do the next post, the next video. I've always stayed away from that, even though I have a fairly high cadence of content creation. I've always been like, this content, like, I like the content, I care about this post or this video. So maybe it doesn't come out every week. Maybe it takes me a couple of weeks to make a podcast episode or a video or a blog post, but all the technical SEO strategies I read about is volume, consistency, keep it going out there. And sometimes I feel like, man, I'm on this hamster wheel. Don't you want me to make good content? So break it down for us. Like, am I doing it wrong? Just for me.
No, you're doing it absolutely right. Everyone else is doing it wrong. No, you've got exactly the right attitude.
Okay.
So there's two things, I guess. One is content and links. They're interrelated, right? So links are an important part of how Google determines whether a site is good or not and whether it should rank. Your links are essentially endorsements. So of course, we now have an entire SEO industry with a kind of dirty underbelly, which goes, you can buy links for money, or you can spend money with an agency who will go and produce content or hassle some journalists in order to get you links, or you can go like sponsor things. So there's various degrees of you can turn money into links, which Google attempts to shut down and ignore, and they're getting better at that. And it's getting harder. So as a result, we now have this content marketing thing, right? Where everybody says, go and have a blog and write 3 things a day, and pick a keyword and write 500 words with structure. Like, what is the thing? How do I do the thing? Where do I get the thing? And the whole internet's full of this garbage. And for a while it worked to a degree because Google needed that content to disambiguate. What are people searching for? What are the kinds of things these websites have expertise on? What problems do they solve? And that for a long time was the industry. And now I think we're almost coming out of that with the rise of AI-powered results and generative search. Google doesn't need that anymore. There are so many of these spaces where we're just producing content about keywords that those problems are already solved. So if you're, I don't know, you've got a company selling insurance or cupcakes, what are you possibly going to write that's going to add new value that Google doesn't already understand, that's contributing to the corpus of human knowledge? Like, you're just rehashing information about 8 ways to avoid your plants freezing at Christmas, or my vegan cupcakes are better than your vegan. None of it's useful. And the thing that's really changed, which I think is great in the last year or so, is Google has just got really, really good at ignoring all that stuff. But all the information out there still says go and write things. So many brands think that good SEO looks like write 3 blog posts a week, pick a keyword, tick the boxes in Yoast, etc. And some of that is foundational. Like, you have to have content that talks about what you do, and you have to have content that tells stories to your users, engages them. But you definitely don't need articles at scale. So yeah, I think the velocity and the cadence is important. I think doing what you're doing, which is write stuff that you're passionate about, that you believe in, that is interesting, that is good, that is useful, that is relevant, at the cadence that makes sense to do that. Like, do 1 a year if that's what it takes to write something excellent. But yeah, the idea that we all need to be churning out words on pages is awful.
Is the essence of it brand building, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's like a brand building, because the way that I've seen everything is like, I grew up in a family that owned car dealerships, largely controlled by General Motors. And it was like, if you ever want to like frame the corporate man talking down to the little people, it's General Motors and a small family car dealership, right? Like, you will do this and you will accept it, and you will take these cars that nobody wants to buy and you will try to sell them. So ingrained in me is to never trust the man, right? Because I grew up in that setting. So I've always looked, and this is probably foolish to some degree, but I've thought about SEO, but I've never invested in it. I never got into PPC or buying ads and all this stuff, largely because maybe I didn't have a product that really needed that leverage. And I've always just looked at the algorithms to be something that isn't ever going to help me. Like, it might help me in the short term, like a little boost kind of thing. But I've always said, I'm going to make my content and just push it out to people and tell people I've got this content. Are the days of organic search data, or excuse me, organic search results going down because of AI and what's happening? In other words, should people be thinking about pushing their brand out more and getting their content out more? Like, nobody going to help you except for yourself. How do you frame that, if at all?
Yeah, for sure. I think the days of build it and they will come if you put the right keyword in it enough times are definitely on the way out. And we definitely see trends where the rise of AI-powered results, and also things like ChatGPT usage and Perplexity and stuff, is changing how people search. It's changing what the results look like. And it's definitely reducing the propensity of people to see your website in a list of other websites and click that one. Like that's not really what that ecosystem looks like anymore. And the answer to that, who knows? But part of the answer to that is probably, build a reputable brand that people will recognize and trust, and already have influenced them with content up the stream and that higher in their journeys, so that when they ask Perplexity, what's the best shampoo, or find me the best Black Friday deals for a new PC monitor, whatever it is, when it says, okay, here are 3 really good ones, they recognize your brand and your messaging because 6 months ago, they read a really interesting article that you wrote, or those kinds of influences and touch points, and those brand building activities, so that you've got that reputation and recall and preference over time. Because it's not going to be the case of, I wrote the best article, I ranked first in this list of links, people are going to click my thing, because the whole landscape is changing. It's definitely going to be more about reputation.
Let's talk a little bit more about WordPress. We're going to transition into talking about the whole .org versus .com thing, and maybe some of this other explosive news from the last couple of weeks post WordCamp US. Keeping it in the frame of reference of WordPress, I consider my brand a flea on an elephant's ass, is how I like to look at my brand in the overall WordPress space. One of the things I've always found interesting with ChatGPT or Claude, which are 2 that I use fairly often, is this being trained on SEO results, the typical blog post, the top whatever. In other words, if I go to either of these 2 chatbots and I type in, give me the best list of WordPress podcasts, it still recommends Matt Report, which is a podcast I haven't done in about 4 years, as one of the top podcast episodes. And it doesn't reference the WP Minute at all, largely because nobody has written a top WordPress podcast blog post in literally 5-6 years when WordPress podcasts had their heydays. So and how is this stuff getting updated for like these little niche markets? Or is it just so little volume that it suffers from the same things that regular SEO suffered from?
Yeah, and even worse, right? Like WordPress is in a weird place. Like, we don't have a marketing function anymore. There's a lot of contributors have been left. There's a lot of stuff that dried up and consolidated it. So you're right, there's not a lot of new content being produced. WordPress.org, which we'll come on to in a minute, I'm sure, is not great when it comes to SEO, politely. So we're not fighting our own battles. We're not creating content. We're not telling our own stories. And meanwhile, the Wixes and the Shopifys are obviously very, very noisy. So yeah, when you were querying these systems for advice and information in this context, what are they drawing from? It is going to be stuff from 2012 because there's not a lot else out there. And even if there were, the volume and reach of that is going to be lower than everyone else's. So yeah, I think this is going to be a real problem. We are going to be very underrepresented in those kinds of results collectively and as a platform.
Yeah.
If only we had some kind of marketing team who could be thinking about
that. One last question on the AI, just because I'm curious. Is this all built off of the back of stolen content? Like, do you believe it to be like that bad?
So hard a question, right? Isn't it? I'm privileged enough to come from a position where my livelihood isn't threatened by this, and I find it a very useful tool that accelerates me. So I'm very lucky to be able to say academically, no, I don't think so. I think there are only so many ways that you can recombine factual statements and words, and a significant proportion of the use cases are, or pixels for images, right? It's just soup, and then you unsoup it. But yeah, it's trained on a corpus of information that it wasn't granted permission to utilize. And even if it's not theft, there ought to have been a consent at some point. Even now, we still don't really have a good model for that, but we're starting to see some options.
Yeah.
But it's too late. I think even if it was theft, it's too late. The genie's out of the bottle. Even if OpenAI never becomes profitable and they fail, something else will fill the space. Yeah. All the information is out there. It's on Common Crawl. It's been reproduced in a million places. This is now the model. Yeah. And even if we don't like it, I think we're stuck with it. So yeah, it's pretty unpleasant.
And Google can't sue them because they stole it from us. Really, it's us, individuals who have been pumping content into the web, and Google just enhancing that searchability, and then these chatbots coming in and go, well, let's just leverage search and take from this index. They've already stolen from the people. So it's just a crazy world at this stage.
There was a nice new feature from Cloudflare, I think announced last week or so, where they're describing this as a third category thing. So it said we've always had bad bots and good bots like scrapers and search engines, and now this is a third category where they're learning and consuming, and they're rolling out tools to monitor it and eventually hope to kind of do a cost per access monetization model. Whether or not that's meaningful, I don't know, but thought it was interesting.
You mentioned WordPress marketing. It's obviously a hot topic, has been a hot topic for many years. We saw that team, the Make team, marketing team, sort of shuttered and closed out, I forget, roughly 6-8 months ago. And it was sort of put in place was the Media Core team, which was an experiment led by Josefa, and then led by Reyes Martinez from Automatic, both of which have now left Automatic, or at least Josefa stepped down from the director role. I haven't seen the Automatic end on her LinkedIn profile yet.
Indeed.
But I saw she stepped down from the director role. Reyes has left Automatic. She reached out to me to let me know. So I don't know what the life holds for the Media Core team. All of this is to get to this issue with marketing WordPress. I've always said, man, it's tough to do marketing from a volunteer-led team with no access, no data, no social media accounts, no budget, no direct channel to a product. Who is the product team? How can we even do this in a volunteer-led system? Your thoughts on marketing WordPress?
That laundry list of things you just said we're not allowed is pretty much the problem, right? And I think Josefa summed that quite well in her. She published a thing saying essentially why we're not going to have a marketing team and why the Media Core was the way forward. And it essentially boils down to you are all asking for the right things and asking the right questions, but I either cannot or will not provide you with these for logistical or political reasons.
Yeah.
Then how do you market? And all the stuff we were saying about the evolution of SEO just now into branding and awareness and preference, that's the whole of marketing, right? Consumers are educated and informed. They make their own decisions. They want to evaluate, compare. They want to be led. They want to be told stories, etc. And we don't have any of the infrastructure or processes or people or resources or systems to even start to ask what that would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the hardest bit of that, of all that laundry list, is the product, right? Like, for better or worse, we have a roadmap to a degree. Gutenberg's doing things. People have varying opinions on whether that's the right direction or not. But we are at war with Wix and Squarespace and other platforms and Vercel and Headless, all these other things. And I'm not even sure we realize that we're at war. And because we just say we were 43% of the web, and we keep saying that until we're not.
Yeah.
And even if we are, those numbers are questionable anyway, right? Depending on how you want to calculate that. And I see, certainly from an SEO perspective, there's still a huge influx of people who want to build websites for the first time, or don't understand what hosting is, or don't know how to do a thing. And they search for problems, whether they do that in Google or ChatGPT or whatever, and we're nowhere. And a WP Beginner and a whole bunch of science networks are generally somewhere. But WordPress collectively, other than .com, which, is contentious, WordPress.org is very rarely represented. And there's very rarely educational hearts and minds onboarding kind of step one content, because Wix and everyone else is just paying their way in there, all competing organically. So we're going to struggle.
From a technical perspective, though, is the simple answer because the community, air quotes, has never invested in it for the .org side. Technically speaking, like we just never gave it a shot.
I've been fighting with .org for what feels like a decade now. It's not the worst website. I think we've put out a lot of the technical fires. There are still kind of existential crises there around how some of it works and its legacy as a tech stack. But the biggest problem is just there's no real kind of content strategy. If you ask simple questions like, if somebody's Googling how to set up a blog, where should they land? Because at the moment, best case scenario, it's probably some itty bitty forum post that somebody wrote 3 years ago that gets a whole bunch of disparate and helpful answers that somebody shut down because they posted something that didn't align with the WordPress.org rules and so yada yada. Like none of those, there's no strategy behind how should this work and how should we guide people through. And then we've got so many moving parts that are disjointed. So we've got the Learn subdomain, which is doing some great work in educational content, but nobody's really reconciled how does that relate to the developer site, which has similar topics. We haven't really retired the codex. The forums are largely moderated in a way that just sprawls rather than answering questions in a consolidated way. All the tutorial stuff is over on .com. Yeah, it's working out how do we market to people and how do we take them on journeys needs to happen before any of the kind of big technical stuff happens. And there's no appetite and no resource to address any of those kind of huge philosophical questions.
And it makes it difficult to, position, let's say, the Learn site. Like if we go back to earlier in this conversation and talk about my strategy of I create content and I just try to go to the world and say, here's my content. And I try to get it in front of people by, pushing it out there and being that sort of outbound content marketer part of me. Nobody really wants to do that for like the Learn site or for .org, especially in these moments of community strife, right? When you just feel drained from doing this. So like even getting even if you said, hey, we're not going to have an internal make team that works on this, it's very hard to get even agencies and freelancers to want to prop up this content too, because they're like, oh God, we're just crossing this finish line of delivering this website to this customer. Now you want me to like promote this content from within. Like this is very, very difficult.
Yeah. And I think this is the biggest existential crisis we face collectively. Aside from the challenges of Matt's leadership and the challenges of all of these things, I think the biggest problem we have is that everyone is burnt out and everyone is gone. And we behave as if there's an infinite pool of contributors just coming in the door to replace them. But you see, as you've already mentioned, like two profoundly important people who were very active and have gone, they've not been replaced. They won't be replaced. There's nobody else coming up through the ranks or entering the doors to take their burden and their workload and to ask the difficult questions and to do the big thinking. There's a lot of people who can be pointed at small tactical things ad hoc and they'll come and go. But I think there's only about 6 people left. Like you look at how inactive Make WordPress is. Like, where is everyone? It's a ghost town.
Yeah.
And that's not, and that's part of the same marketing challenge in question. It's a different flavor of it, but it's the same problem.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest impact and the biggest risk of all the stuff that's happening at the moment, that we are not bringing people in and we're not raising them up.
I have friends when we, and we're not going to talk about it on this podcast, but when we talk politics, people just say, I want to go back to cheaper gas, cheaper food. And I say, guess what, everybody? Hey, we ain't going back. We might go down we might go down a couple dimes and nickels, but we're not going back to what we enjoyed before. It's just not going to happen. We're in a new paradigm now. And I think that we're in this new scenario in WordPress where now we have to look at, this is just my opinion, and obviously you chime in with yours, but I look at the community now after this, and the dust hasn't even settled yet, by the way, because we're still, we don't even know what's happening next. I was going to say we're still in court, but we're not even there yet. So we have to figure out, how are we going to repair the community and what's it going to look like moving forward? It's not going to be like it was before. WordCamps might not even be what it was before. We could see a dramatic drop in people wanting to even do it, sponsor it, go to the event. What are we going to do moving forward, looking differently? And that's where my mind is going, but also still waiting to see what happens with all the stuff with WP Engine. So it's a very rocky road. It's back to being a human problem again. It's not even a technical problem. It's back to a human problem. How do we repair moving forward? I don't have the answers yet, but any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think WordCamps are a really interesting example. And the event space more broadly outside that, I think one of the things I gripe about occasionally is I think WordCamps could be so much more. But again, it's the same problem, is we need to kind of decide what they are. And that's a big philosophical, complex question, and there's nobody in the driving seat. But if they are designed to be recruitment for new contributors and onboarding, then they need to be resourced and budgeted and run in a way that reflects that. And at the moment, they are wonderful events, but they are part meetup, part get together, part education, part recruitment, part lunch. Don't really know. It's us talking to us in the same way that the media court was us talking to us. And I know there's been some vague conversations about starting to break out of that bubble, and now everyone gets like $200 to go and put some flyers at the local train station. But that's not going to fix it. It's like this is microscopic and it's well intended, but it's so far in the wrong direction. I think it is all human problems. And so some of that is one human in particular, for better or worse. But a lot of it cascades back to we don't have the my vocabulary is just dried up. We don't have the freedom and the ability to ask or take action on these big philosophical questions and these big people problems, because everything stops back at Matt's door, and he's either not engaged or has a different opinion. So it just gets stuck and it drops, and people get burn out and leave. And WordCamps remain lovely, but somewhat ineffectual.
So I've sort of built a career, questioning and being a critic of Matt and leadership, and I feel like I've done it in a professional light. Maybe some people would disagree, but I've never gone way overboard with conspiracy theories and in fact, even to this day, still thinking I don't know anyone else who could lead the software project other than him, though very questionable on the tactics side of things, for sure. Let's just start transitioning to talk about like some of the things that have felt kind of bad as community members, especially if you're a theme or plugin owner and you have your themes and plugins on WordPress.org. Going back to my knocking on your door, .org.com. Can you outline for those that maybe don't remember because of all this stuff recently that happened? What did .com do that felt so bad?
Yeah, so and it does feel like years ago now, doesn't it? And it's really consequential in comparison, but it's the same route. So .com essentially copied the whole plugin repository from .org. They went, take it across, this is now our version. And that was really interesting for a few reasons. One is I don't think that had been done at that scale beforehand. And whilst Matt's response to a lot of critiques is, just go fork it and go copy it. Obviously, that's not as simple as it sounds, and there are huge overheads associated with that. The plugin repository not being a small one of those, but they did it. And it was ostensibly to provide a kind of an easier route in for .com customers to browse and install plugins. There are two big caveats with that. One is on .com, that's a paid ecosystem. Like you have to be on whatever particular tier it is of usage in order to access and use those, which is not the case with .org. And then the SEO angle is quite interesting because .com is a big authoritative website with a marketing team and a strategy and lots of great useful content that now has its own version of all of these pages, which until then, individual plugin vendors and individual users searched for and managed and found through .org. And suddenly we have this competitor where .com is accidentally, stealing, traffic and visitors who might otherwise have found the .org pages and downloaded and installed a thing for free, and now potentially getting confused, are now potentially signing up for .com hosting plans where they might not otherwise have done so. And it all just gets a little bit murky, and it looks like a play, right? It looks like it's a, how do we monetize this traffic, which it may or may not be. And it's part of a bigger question about the .com versus .org relationship, which is another question we're not allowed to ask or answer or be involved in because we just accept that it's a philosophical nightmare. But the SEO angle was the first time that I'd come on, is what happens when .com starts eating market share from .org. And I think what's really interesting about that is if you look back as far as circa 2011, 2012, .org is 5 or 6 times the size in terms of visibility of .com. You run any off-the-shelf SEO tool and it'll give you an estimate of how big is this site in terms of what does it rank for and how much traffic does it attract. .org is scoring, 20 points and .com is scoring 4 points. Now, 2024, they are almost level.
Wow. Because
.org is decaying over time because it's not loved. It doesn't have a marketing strategy. It's a little bit on fire. All the problems we've discussed, whereas .com is growing, not enormously and not at a hockey stick pace, but they're doing well. They've got a content strategy. They've got SEO people. They now have a plugins repository. And it's not yet at the point where it's massively cannibalizing .org, but there are some really interesting points. Things like names of certain functionality. Like people who are searching for things like SSL certificates or how to reset their passwords. Some of those kinds of queries, .com is starting to outrank .org with either the plugins repository or their own help documentation, which arguably then is just a kind of the learn stuff as well. So yeah, we now have more than ever a big competitor. And it's once again us. And Matt's, there was a slight exploration of, is there a way we can mitigate this? If the intended use case is mostly just for logged in WordPress.com users, maybe we could no index it, maybe we could canonicalize it. There are SEO tactics we could use to lock that down so that it benefits everybody, but none of that's been done. And I know Matt's aware of those because he read my blog post on it and he commented saying, very interesting, thanks. And they did nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is not healthy.
Which against the backdrop of this alleged WP Engine trademark issue, it's very concerning. And there's a headline in The Verge. We are recording this on Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. There's a headline on The Verge, Matt Mullenweg, quote, WordPress.org just belongs to me. And end quote. And this is why I think so many of us, though we question this move of like mirroring .org to .com, those of us in the know, like you, me, and probably most of us listening to this, are just like, we can't do anything about it. Like we can rant and holler and do all this stuff, but really we can't do anything about it. And I think that's the biggest struggle because of the passion that we have for WordPress, but also at the same time, we're just boxed in to these decision makings and things like that, look, at the end of the day, I don't know. I guess I have I don't know if it's an optimist outlook on this, but does it help plugin and theme owners that .com is ranking if the end user is using their theme and plugin, it just happens to be on .com? Or is there... Yeah,
this is Matt's argument, right? That more marketplaces is more good because it's more reach, it's more exposure, it's more discovery. And in theory, then more people find stuff, except this whole paid angle. So right now, if you search for Gravity Forms in the US, .com ranks second and .org ranks sixth. So there is definitely a non-zero chance that you as a user who doesn't really know what you're doing is going to end up paying money for a hosting plan to unlock that instead of getting it for free.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's 10 people, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 1,000, but that's distributed across a long tail of a whole bunch of scenarios. Is that net positive? Would those people have gone and self-hosted something and got the free version? Maybe not. Maybe they do want the hand holding of a managed hosting plan and to get it through a package. Or it just feels a little bit murky and disingenuous to be presenting them as they're the same thing and this is net positive, right? And to your point on there's nothing we can do. Yeah, Matt owns both websites, but my livelihood to a degree and yours and many others is tied somewhat to the success of WordPress. And therefore we're all invested in how do we make this successful and grow its reach, etc. And yeah, good strategy comes with compromises. So we need to go, okay, if we can't do X, we need to do Y. But Y is also political. And everywhere we turn, you end up with an insurmountable, okay, we don't have the resource, we don't have the budget, we don't have the permission. Matt says no, yada, yada. And I think the thing that we're all frustrated with and why so many people are leaving is we cannot see a route forwards. All we can see is kind of maintain the status quo, hang on tight to whatever drama comes next. We'll shake off a few more contributors and we'll have to take on more of the workload. And there isn't a route, certainly that I can see, where we go, okay, now we're beating Wix. Now we are moving forwards. Now we're growing. Now we're doing great stuff.
Yeah.
Scary.
The other day I logged into my WordPress.com account. I have a paid $300 a year WordPress.com account for a website another newsletter that I have called The Podcast Setup, where I write about podcasting. And I noticed it's been a couple weeks since I've published anything there. So it's been a couple weeks since I've logged into .com. But I've noticed now when I log into .com, Marketplace is right under plugins. And that sort of distinction wasn't there before, or at least I certainly hadn't seen it in the last month or so. So the Marketplace is now getting pushed on .com, at least in my plan, much more visibly. One of the things I was thinking about through this whole WP Engine thing was, well, maybe they're enterprise software. I used to sell against them as a Pagely account executive. I was there for 3 years. So they are, for every account, a software enterprise company. They're vicious, they are cruel, they are tactful in their sales, as any enterprise software company is, right? So I wouldn't have put it past them if WP Engine was going to launch what I call the HubSpot-esque sort of marketplace, where HubSpot has a marketplace, you can buy stuff, but guess what? If you go from HubSpot to, say, Salesforce or Asana or whatever, you're not taking that marketplace stuff with you. It's there, right? And I could certainly see WP Engine launching something like that to really challenge the ecosystem. But now, as I see it, well, .com has a marketplace, and Matt kind of like thrust them to create their own mirror of .org. Maybe that's just going to thrust them to make a marketplace faster than what they had maybe previously planned, or maybe had never thought of. And now they're like, aha, like, we'll call this a marketplace and we'll start selling stuff through it.
The best thing that will happen there is we'll then have an even more reinforced confusion between WordPress and WordPress. And then the solution will be, we'll add a marketplace on .org. So we'll just have like all of these confusing mirrors of each other. Why not?
Right. And that made me start to think about, well, if you go back like a decade or 12 years when the Avada theme and Visual Composer was out there, you were buying stuff from Theme Forest, and Matt was really like, whoa, that's not the WordPress experience I want people to have. Right. So it was that same thing, but now it's like a mega hosting company is kind of doing that. It is, again, I don't have a particular angle on this, but I'm just observing it. And I'm like, wow, the marketplace thing could happen sooner across multiple entities because of all of this. And is that the outcome we really wanted?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what happens. I don't think it's the outcome we want. I would be very surprised if Newfold, Bluehost don't do the same thing as well. And everybody's hosting onboarding flow now has some kind of, and you can premium upsell to these plugins, etc., that they do in their own mini curated repository. Yeah, and WordPress becomes a fragmented, distributed thing where wherever you happen to run your website, you're tied into, you've got your plugins here, you've got your add-ins here. This is proprietary. This works differently. Yeah, all that portability stuff goes away, which I think certainly, I And I'm being very negative, but there are huge advantages to WordPress, and I love it. And one of the huge advantages, certainly one that Matt praises a lot, is the portability angle, right? There's all the data transfer portability stuff happening at the moment. Yeah, that's at risk, I think, if we end up in a landscape of marketplaces and verticals, individual little silos.
The last shoe to drop for me on these .com plugin and theme pages will be if they have like a, running your own WordPress, install this plugin with Jetpack. And then people will be like, whoa, wait a minute. Because they have that site management angle, right? So does .com, but so does Jetpack, where you could kind of use Jetpack services like a managed WP or, name your favorite kind of management plugin service. You could do the same thing. We're like, hey, if you're running this on your own site, you can just install Jetpack and we'll install this plugin for you and keep it updated. That would be a very, very interesting thing to watch, because then I would say, yeah, we've got an issue here. How do the plugin and theme authors get a cut of this traffic?
Yeah, sheesh.
Let's start wrapping it up.
Deep breath.
We're not quitting WordPress, people. I'm not quitting WordPress. I can't. But from your angle on the SEO side, like I said before, I saw some folks saying, "Hey, just switch to Laravel." Just switch to Laravel, Matt. What do you think? Oh, yeah, sure, it's the same thing. From the
migrate from ACF, sure.
Yeah, sure, it's easy. It's very easy. What do you see in the SEO world that is something that is a kind of an off ramp to WordPress? Is it a Wix? Is it a Squarespace? Is it Statamic? Like, what other CMSs do you look at? Go, okay, they're doing a fairly good job, but nowhere near as good as WordPress.
There's nothing even remotely close. This is my biggest gripe as a largely technical SEO. I spend a lot of time poking at WordPress and other platforms. And my word, just pick anything else, name it, and you've got a year of work to do employing a team of half a dozen developers to even get parity to where WordPress was last year, never mind to maintain the velocity to stay ahead. So many of the sites and businesses I work with are running, I don't know, a Sanity or a Wix or a headless something or other, or they've done a thing in React with a backend on something you've never heard of on a Gatsby, or they're all awful universally. Like some of them are very good at one thing, like a lot of them preference developer experience, which I'm never sure is a good thing to preference if you're trying to run a business, like preference marketing tools, etc. But whatever. Some of them are very fast. Some of them are accessible. Some of them, it's very easy to do custom post type like stuff. None of them are good at technical SEO, and none of them are good at all the things across the board. And nor is WordPress out of the box, but it's extensible and customizable enough that if you know the right tools and tips and tricks, it's easy enough to get there. I don't see, and this is the most frustrating thing, I don't see anything else even being able to catch up. We have such a moat when it comes to extensibility and inherent capabilities and resourcing, even as diminished as we are. And yet still we're losing the war because we can't tell that story because all the big, scary philosophical questions.
All right.
Very, very frustrating.
I haven't asked this low-hanging fruit question since probably like my first dozen or so podcast episodes, but your favorite SEO plugin, your favorite collection of plugins that you use on your WordPress sites?
Wow. Let me go see what I'm running. So yeah, I disclosure, I worked at Yoast for 5 years. Yep. So I will say Yoast. But I worked at Yoast because I believed in the plugin and because I thought it was the best one, not the other way around. So I'll still say Yoast. I think I'm a little bit frustrated with them organizationally, the team, which is partly why I left. It would be nice to see them ship some new features that aren't just the AI thing. I think that's very exciting, very shiny, but there's definitely more work to be done in workflows and other areas. But yeah, Yoast SEO definitely is my SEO plugin for choice, just because it does 1,000 things behind the scenes that most people shouldn't ever need to care about, that none of the others do. Like silly stuff like, there's a no index HTTP header on your RSS feeds so that Google doesn't spend ages calling and indexing them. That nobody else does because nobody else has even asked that question. And there's 1,000 of those. So that's really nice. Other stuff I really like. What am I using at the moment? Trimmed back recently. All the usual stuff, right? User role, and this is really nice stuff that should be canonical plugins. Not that we know what canonical plugin means. All the stuff that the Google performance team are doing. So the performance lab stuff, the speculative loading plugin that came out the other day, speculation headers are really cool for performance. Sitekit's cool. Nothing too surprising.
Cool.
ACF obviously is architecture, really nice for SEO because inevitably you end up wanting to do things like this is a cupcake page and I need to know what color frosting it has and I want to grab that value and I want to incorporate it into the meta description. That sort of stuff's really nice. Yeah, otherwise nothing too unusual, I don't think.
Fantastic. He is Jono Alderson. You can find him at jonoalderson.com. One of the last blog posts at the time of this recording is the death of the category page. I'm going to be diving into this blog post right after this, because is the category page dead? Well, you have to find out on jonoalderson.com. Jono, thanks for hanging out today. It's been fun.
No, thanks for having me. It's been really lovely. Excellent.